While I was having dinner at my son's house, my grandson called me, his voice trembling. "Grandma, are you home?" "No, sweetie. I'm at your Uncle Jason's for dinner," he whispered. "Then who's in your house right now?" And my daughter-in-law burst out laughing. "I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to see just how far it's traveled." The dinner began. Ashley, my younger daughter-in-law, served the first course, a soup. The creamy vegetable aroma made my stomach rumble. With a practiced skill, she struck up a conversation in her sing-songy little voice. "Hey, Mom, have any customers been asking if you'd sell the fritters lately?" I didn't even get a chance to answer before Karen, my older daughter-in-law, jumped in. Her tone very convincing. "I still think that if you sold that recipe to one of those big companies, it would be great for the whole family. And you wouldn't have to kill yourself working so hard anymore." Karen's words were like a needle piercing my heart. The recipe for the homemade fritters, the one my mom passed down to me, wasn't just a recipe. It was the very soul of our family, of those days when my mother and I would cook together with beads of sweat on our foreheads. I just smiled and gently changed the subject. "Oh, come on, we can talk about that later. Right now, let's just enjoy our meal." But just then, my phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The screen showed the name Leo, my 18-year-old grandson, Rob and Karen's son. I answered, feeling a little worried when I heard his shaky, rushed voice. "Grandma, are you at your house?" I answered, trying to stay calm. "I'm at Jason's house having dinner, son." "What's wrong?" Leo lowered his voice, whispering as if he was afraid of being overheard. "Then who's in your house?" I just walked by and saw the beam of a flashlight moving around in the kitchen. My heart dropped, as if someone was squeezing it in their chest. Leo is a careful kid. He's not one to make things up. If he saw a flashlight in my house, something bad was definitely happening. I was about to ask him more, but Ashley suddenly let out a laugh, a loud and strangely shrill laugh. "Oh, Mom, the boy probably saw a stray cat that got in and is just getting spooked over nothing." Karen rushed to play along, her voice forced. "Yeah, Mom, maybe he just imagined it. It's probably nothing." But my daughters-in-law's words didn't calm me down. The soup on the table suddenly tasted like nothing, as if all the flavor had vanished. The warm atmosphere from before was now just a false front, a heaviness that surrounded me. Just a few hours earlier, I was carefully wiping down the counter at my little shop, running a soft old cloth over the gleaming wood. I was lost in my work when my cell phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I took it out and saw Ashley's name on the screen. It struck me as odd, because she almost never called me at that time of day. Ashley's voice on the other end sounded strangely cheerful, as if she was genuinely trying to make me happy. "Mom, don't make dinner tonight. Come over to our house. My sister-in-law Karen is coming too. It's been so long since we both cooked something nice for you." I thought about it for a moment. Ashley and Karen, my two daughters-in-law, were always busy with their jobs and their own lives. They rarely invited me to dinner, let alone organized a proper family meal. I was a little surprised, but then I felt a warmth in my chest. How long had it been since my family got together like this? "Okay, honey," I answered in a soft voice. "I'll be there." I closed up the fritter shop earlier than usual, excited by the idea of sitting down with my kids, of talking and laughing. Before leaving, I stopped by the little market near my house. The stalls were bursting with color, and the air smelled of ripe fruit. I carefully picked out a basket of fresh mangoes and oranges, and I added a bottle of red wine, the kind I knew Ashley liked. It didn't feel right to show up at her house empty-handed. With the grocery bag in my hand, I started walking, feeling light on my feet, as if I were back in my younger years when the whole family lived close together. When I got to Ashley's house, Karen was already there. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a speed that was a pleasure to watch, and the sound of the knife against the cutting board was like a cheerful melody. Ashley was busy at the stove, and the aroma of the soup starter already filled the whole house. Seeing my two daughters-in-law preparing dinner together warmed my heart. Ashley's house looked very different from its usual mess today. The table was set with a spotless white tablecloth. and a few scented candles gave off a soft lavender smell. The warm yellow light covered everything, making me feel like I had walked into a small, cozy but elegant party. Ashley ran to greet me and took me by the hand to the sofa. "You just sit down and rest, Mom. We'll finish up." I smiled and nodded, but inside, I felt a little strange. All this kindness from her today was a bit over the top, not like her usual self. I opened my bag and took out the basket of fruit and the bottle of wine. They both squealed with delight, and Karen said the wine looked really good. But when our eyes accidentally met, I saw Karen shoot a quick glance at Ashley. It was a split-second look, but it was full of nerves, as if they were hiding something. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was probably just overthinking things. While I waited, I sat on the sofa watching them in silence. My two daughters-in-law moved back and forth from the kitchen to the living room, and they kept exchanging strange looks whenever they thought I wasn't watching. Suddenly, Ashley would laugh loudly, as if she was deliberately trying to break the silence. Karen, on the other hand, kept her head down, fidgeting with the hem of her blouse, and not daring to look me in the eye. I started to feel an uneasiness creeping in, as if this whole warm atmosphere was just a fragile shell. And now I realized that uneasiness was not unfounded at all. The forced atmosphere in Ashley's dining room was like a sharp knife cutting through my thoughts. I gripped the spoon in my hand, but my mind had already drifted far away to the days of the past, where the memory of my little shop and my mom's homemade fritter recipe was still as vivid as if it were yesterday. The smell of the now cold soup on the table couldn't chase away this anxiety tightening its grip on my chest. Leo's trembling voice on the phone, "Who's in your house?" echoed in my head like a bad omen. I looked at Ashley and Karen. They were both still trying to act happy, but they couldn't hide the tension in their eyes. I had a knot in my stomach, and in that moment, I let the memories carry me away as a way to find peace in the middle of the coming storm. I remembered my youth, when I was a 20-year-old girl, standing in that tiny kitchen on a corner of the farmer's market. My shop back then was just a little stall with a few old wooden tables and a used oven my mom had left me. The homemade fritter recipe was the most precious inheritance she gave me before she died. She always used to tell me, "Martha, you have to protect this recipe because it's not just how to make fritters, it's the heart of our family." I can still clearly remember those mornings. Just as the sun was rising and the morning dew was still in the air, my mom and I in the kitchen, carefully rolling out the dough, preparing the filling, and frying up batches of golden brown fritters. The smell of butter mixed with the sizzle of the hot oil, like a song of life, of pure love. At first, the little shop only had a few regular customers, the kind neighbors who would stop by to support me. But then, as if by magic, word started to spread. The aroma of the fritters wafted through the whole neighborhood, attracting strangers from other areas, even from nearby towns, who came just to try those simple fritters. They would form long lines outside the shop, waiting patiently, and they'd smile eagerly when they got their hot fritters. Once an old woman took my hand. Her eyes filled with tears and told me, "Young lady, your fritters remind me of my mother. Thank you." Those moments, though small, made me feel that my hard work was worth it, that I was carrying on my mother's legacy, not just with a recipe, but with my whole heart. Many years passed, and the little shop became my pride and joy. But with that, tempting offers also started to come in. A wealthy businessman once knocked on my door with a wad of cash in his hand, saying he was willing to pay me enough to buy a big, beautiful house. "Mrs. Martha, if you just sell me the recipe, you'll never have to set foot in a kitchen again," he told me, very confidently. Then, a large food company sent me a thick contract, promising to open a chain of restaurants in my name, with juicy percentage-based profits. I read every line of that contract, but I felt a chill in my soul. They didn't understand that the homemade fritters weren't just a dish. They were my family's history. They were the days my mom and I pulled ourselves out of poverty. They were the drops of sweat that fell over the hot stove. I shook my head, smiling politely but firmly. "Thank you, but it's not for sale." I've always believed that a family dish only has a real soul when it comes from the hands of the person who makes it, in their own familiar little kitchen, to serve customers who truly appreciate it. Money can buy houses and cars, but it can't buy memories. It can't replace the aroma of family love. Every time I fry a batch of fritters, it's as if I see my mom beside me, smiling with her gentle warmth, as if she's still watching over me. I didn't want that recipe to become a mass-produced product, made by soulless machines in a factory. I wanted it to live, to truly live, in every fritter made with love. I had thought a lot about who I would pass this secret on to. Rob and Jason, my two sons, grew up in the shop, but they weren't passionate about cooking. Rob was busy with his engineering job and Jason loved business. I don't blame them. Everyone has their own path. But then I realized that Leo, my 18-year-old grandson, Rob and Karen's son, was the one I wanted to leave this legacy to. Since he was a little boy, he was always attached to my hip. He loved watching me make the fritters, and his eyes would light up every time he smelled the butter and breadcrumbs. Leo had an incredible attention to detail. From how he watched my every move to how he would carefully ask, "Grandma, why do you have to add a little salt to the filling? Why does the oil have to be at just the right temperature?" I would look at him, filled with hope. Leo not only had skilled hands, but also a heart that knew how to value the simple things. Every time I fried fritters, Leo would stand by my side, as attentive as a little apprentice. Once he secretly grabbed some dough trying to make his own filling, but he made a huge mess all over the kitchen. I laughed and ruffled his hair. "Take it easy, son. To make good fritters, you have to have patience." Leo nodded, his eyes shining, as if he had found something more valuable than gold. I knew that he didn't just love the fritters, but also the story behind them, the story of our family, of our unity in tough times. But completely opposite to Leo, Karen and Ashley saw the fritter recipe differently. They didn't see the soul of the dish. They only saw the dollar signs dancing behind it. I remember the times they would hint at it with a very practical tone. "Mom, sell the recipe. That way we'll all do much better, much faster. You wouldn't have to kill yourself in the kitchen anymore." Karen once sat across from me, her coffee cup in hand, and told me very convincingly, Mom, in this day and age, who holds on to those family heirloom things? A contract with a big company could change all of our lives." Ashley was more direct, so direct it would leave me cold. "Why are you holding on to that recipe, Mom? It's just a dish. If you don't want to sell it, at least share it with us so we can do something bigger with it." Those words, though disguised as concern, made a silent alarm go off inside me. I wasn't angry, but I was disappointed. They didn't understand that the homemade fritters weren't just food. They were an entire legacy, the memory of my mom, of the days when I was a little girl, and she would take my hand to teach me how to roll the dough, when the aroma of the fritters soothed the hardships of life. I tried to explain it to them, but every time I did, Karen would just sigh and Ashley would shrug, unwilling to understand. I knew they didn't see the soul of the dish. They only saw the dollar signs dancing behind it. My thoughts were cut short, and I returned to the suffocating reality of Ashley's dining room. Just as I hung up the phone, Ashley and Karen exchanged a lightning-fast look, a glance that shot by like a flash, but one I managed to see. Ashley quickly started laughing, trying to sound carefree. "Don't worry, Mom, Leo probably just imagined it. He's been so jumpy lately, right, Karen?" Karen nodded over and over, but her hands were trembling, and she wouldn't look me in the eye. "Yeah, Mom," she said in a forced voice. "It was probably just the light from the neighbor's house reflecting. You just keep eating." But their words didn't calm me. On the contrary, they only made my suspicions grow. Leo is not a kid who imagines things. He's sharp-eyed and has a good head on his shoulders, especially when he's worried about me. I felt like my soul was leaving my body. I stood up, my voice firm. "I have to go home and see what's going on." But before I could take a step, Ashley quickly grabbed my arm, pulling me back with more strength than I expected. "No, Mom, wait," she pleaded in a syrupy, sweet voice, but I could hear the hidden panic underneath. "The salmon I'm making is going to burn in the oven. If you leave now, you'll waste all the love we put into it." Karen also reacted quickly, standing up and pouring me a full glass of red wine, almost forcing me to take it. "Have a little sip, Mom, to warm you up." "It's a cold night," she said, but her eyes were fixed on the floor, as if she didn't dare look me in the face. I took the glass but didn't drink. I noticed that Karen's hand was shaking slightly when she gave it to me, and Ashley couldn't stop looking at the clock on the wall, as if she were counting the seconds. Their actions were too strange, too forced, as if they were doing everything they could to keep me here. I sat back down, not because I wanted to, but because I needed time to think, to understand what was happening. But inside, my alarm bells were ringing at full volume. I felt like I was trapped in a poorly acted play, where Ashley and Karen were the lead actresses, and I was the unwilling spectator to distract me. Ashley suddenly pulled out an old wedding album, the photos already yellowed with time. "Look, Mom," she said, laughing with that sing-songy voice, as if trying to create a happy mood. "Look how young you were. You and Dad made such a beautiful couple." She flipped through the pages, pointing at photos of my husband and me from decades ago, when Rob and Jason were mischievous little boys. Karen played along too, pointing to a photo where I was wearing my wedding dress. "Mom, you were gorgeous back then, like a movie star." But their voices didn't sound sincere. It was as if they were trying to stall for time, to keep me from thinking about Leo's call. I smiled back at them, but inside, I just wanted to scream. Every word, every gesture from them was like a needle pricking at my calm. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost 9 p.m. Time was passing slowly, but my heart was on fire. I wanted to call Leo again, to see if he was okay, but every time I tried to reach for my phone, Ashley would quickly jump in, telling some story about him. "You know what, Mom?" she'd say with false enthusiasm. "Leo just made the school's taekwondo team. He's been bragging about it all week." Karen would nod, adding, "Yeah, Mom, he's getting really strong. They'll probably make him captain soon." But those words only made me more suspicious. Why were they trying so hard to create this fake, happy family atmosphere? Why wouldn't they let me call Leo, or at least let me leave? I felt like I was being held prisoner, not with chains, but with smiles and lies. Ashley even made up a story that sent a chill down my spine. "I heard Jason say you haven't been sleeping well lately. Maybe that's why you're imagining strange things." I looked at her, trying to keep my voice calm. "I don't have insomnia, Ashley. I'm just worried about Leo." But she just laughed, shaking her head as if I was some paranoid old woman. Just then the doorbell rang. I was about to get up, but Ashley shot up to get the door, quick as a flash. I heard her say something in a rushed voice to someone outside, and then the door slammed shut. When she came back, I asked, "Who was it, honey?" Ashley shrugged, laughing. "Nobody, Mom, just a door-to-door salesman. I sent him away." But I noticed she was clenching her hands, as if trying to hide her nervousness. I wanted to go open the door to see for myself, but Ashley's cold stare stopped me. She didn't want me to have contact with anyone outside that room. The dinner dragged on in a very strange way. They served the salmon. It smelled delicious, but I no longer had the stomach to eat. Ashley and Karen kept changing the subject, from Leo's classes to their plans for the weekend. But in the end, like a circle they couldn't escape, they came back to the topic of the frita recipe. Karen suddenly asked, her voice probing, "Mom, have you ever thought that if one day you don't have the strength to make fritters anymore, who's going to get the secret?" I looked her straight in the eye, feeling the tension in her gaze. I answered with an indifferent but sharp tone, "Whoever has the heart to take care of it will get it." The mood in the room grew heavy for a moment. Ashley and Karen fell silent, exchanging another look, but this time I clearly saw the worry in their eyes. Then, as if to break the tension, Ashley quickly stood up and served dessert, a plate of glistening flame. "Try this, Mom, I made it with a new recipe," she said, trying to sound enthusiastic. But I was no longer in the mood to eat. I pushed the plate away and looked at both of them. "I'm full. I want to go home." Ashley quickly cut in. "Oh, Mom, eat a little more. It's still early." But I wasn't listening anymore. In my head, Only Leo's question echoed, "Who's in your house?" Just as I was about to stand up again, determined to leave, the phone on the table suddenly rang, interrupting everything. The name of Mrs. Davis, my neighbor, a dear friend who has lived next to my house for over 30 years, appeared on the screen. I answered, my heart pounding a mile a minute, sensing that something terrible was happening. Mrs. Davis's voice on the other end was frantic, broken, as if she were trying to hold back fear. "Martha, where are you?" "The boy, Leo, he's hurt. They just took him away in an ambulance." My ears started ringing, like the whole world was collapsing around me. The dessert spoon fell from my hand onto the plate, making a sharp clank that echoed in the now silent room. My mind went blank. All I could hear was Mrs. Davis's trembling voice repeating in my head, "Leo hurt?" My grandson, the grandson I love like my own flesh and blood, was in danger. I couldn't believe it. I blurted out, my voice breaking, almost shouting into the phone, "Why is he hurt? What happened?" Mrs. Davis was still shaking, her voice choked. "I don't know for sure, Martha. I just heard the boy screaming out in the yard, like he was fighting with someone. I ran to look, and he was lying on the ground by your fence, covered in blood. I called the ambulance right away. He's at General Hospital now." Every word she said was like a stab to my heart. Leo, my strong grandson, always with a smile on his face, was now somewhere between life and death. I felt my legs give way, but I clenched my teeth, trying to stay calm. I looked up at Ashley and Karen. The room had suddenly fallen silent. There were no more fake laughs, no more evasive words. Ashley was as pale as a sheet, her hands shaking so much she almost dropped the plate she was holding. Karen was in a full-blown panic. She covered her face with her hands and suddenly burst into loud sobs. "Oh my God!" It was me. I hurt my own son. Karen's words hit me like a thunderclap. Hurt her own son? What did she just say? I stared at her wide-eyed, but my mind was in such a turmoil that I couldn't immediately grasp what she meant. But I had no time to think. I jumped up, my voice shaky but firm. "Let's go. We have to go to the hospital right now." Ashley and Karen moved clumsily, but they didn't dare say no. I practically dragged them both to the car, giving them no chance to hesitate. The three of us piled into my old car, and I slammed on the gas, heading straight for General Hospital in the dark of the night. On the way, no one said a word. Karen was in the front seat, crying silently, repeating over and over, "I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have." Those words squeezed my heart, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to hear anything else. I just wanted to get to the hospital, to see Leo, to know if my grandson was safe. Ashley was sitting in the back in a frightening silence. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror and saw her clutching her cell phone, her fingers moving quickly as if she were sending a message. Her eyes were cold, emotionless, as if she were trying to hide a terrible secret. I wanted to scream at her, to ask her what she was doing, who she was talking to, but I held back. All my energy right now was focused on driving, on praying for Leo. I clutched the rosary I wore on my wrist, the small pearl beads passing through my trembling fingers. "Dear Lord, please take care of my boy," I whispered, my voice choked. Leo was my pride, the grandson who had brought light to my lonely days. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. When we arrived at the hospital, the cold white light of the hallway sent a shiver down my spine. I ran to the reception desk, my voice breaking. "Leo Martinez, my grandson, where is he?" The nurse looked at me with compassion and led us to the emergency area. A doctor came out, his face serious but not overly tense. "Are you young Leo's grandmother?" he asked. I nodded, my heart racing. He continued, "The young man lost a lot of blood from a wound in his abdomen, but luckily the knife didn't hit any vital organs. We've already taken him into surgery, and for now his condition is more stable, but we still need to keep him under observation." I let out a breath, but my legs went so weak that I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Leo was alive. My grandson was alive. I sank into one of the cold hallway chairs, listening to every frantic beat of my heart. Karen was beside me and started crying even harder, beating her own chest with her hands. "It was my fault. I hurt my own son. Oh my God. I looked at her feeling a mix of anger and pain. Hurt her own son? What was she talking about? I wanted to ask her, but I didn't have the strength. I just looked at her with a cold stare, as if trying to see through her soul. Ashley, on the other hand, was standing a few feet away, stiff as a stone statue, her gaze lost in the distance. She wasn't crying, she wasn't talking, she was just there, as if trying to block out all her emotions. For the first time in my life, I felt a dark, criminal line being drawn right through the middle of the family I loved so much. The hours of waiting outside the emergency room felt like a lifetime. When the doctor finally came out to tell us the surgery had been a success and Leo was now in the recovery room, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from my chest. But that relief was short-lived because worry and doubt still clung to me. Leo, my dear grandson, had almost lost his life, and Karen's phrase, "I hurt my own son," kept replaying in my head like a warning of a dark secret I couldn't yet grasp. The next morning, the faint sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, illuminating the cold white walls. Karen and I had stayed all night without sleeping a wink, sitting in silence by Leo's bed. Karen was curled up in a corner, her eyes swollen from crying, but she said nothing, only occasionally murmuring nonsensical apologies. I looked at her with a mixture of pity and rage. I wanted to ask her what she had done, but I held back because the most important thing right now was Leo. Rob arrived at the hospital very early, cutting a business trip short. He walked into the room with a haggard face and red eyes, as if he had cried the whole way. He took my hand and said in a trembling voice, "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner." I just nodded, saying nothing, because I knew Rob was hurting just as much as I was. He sat by Leo's bed, never taking his eyes off him, as if he feared that if he blinked, his son would disappear. A little later, Jason and Ashley arrived. Jason came in looking worried, but trying to stay calm. He hugged me and whispered, "Mom, Leo's going to be okay, right?" I nodded, but my gaze drifted involuntarily to Ashley. She was standing in a corner of the room, arms crossed, trying to look concerned, but her expression was strangely tense. She looked at Leo, then at me, but her gaze was cold, as if she were hiding something. I felt a chill run down my spine. Ashley wasn't like Karen. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She was just there, like a statue without feelings. Leo started to wake up when I softly called his name. "Leo, can you hear me, son?" He blinked weakly, his dry, chapped lips moving slightly. His voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "Grandma, I saw someone in your kitchen." His words were like a knife to my heart. I squeezed his cold hand, trying to speak to him as gently as possible to calm him down. "Everything's okay now, Leo. Your grandma's here. Tell me everything, slowly. There's no rush." Leo took a weak breath, his tired eyes looking at me, but they still held the strength of a young man. He began to tell his story, his voice broken but clear. "That night, after I finished studying with my friends, I was walking home. I passed by your house, Grandma, and I saw a flashlight flickering in the kitchen. Your house was completely dark, so I knew something was wrong. I called you to see if you were there, but when I hung up, I got really worried. I thought if it was a burglar, I had to do something to protect your house." Hearing that, my heart twisted. Leo, my grandson of just 18 years, had put himself in danger just to protect my home, the place that held so many memories and the family's legacy. He continued, his voice growing weaker. I started shouting to get the neighbors' attention, hoping someone would hear me. But then I saw a shadow jump the back garden fence trying to escape. I didn't think much. I just wanted to stop him. I lunged at him, trying to tackle him because I do taekwondo. I thought I could. Leo paused, squeezing his eyes shut as if reliving that horrible moment. But he was stronger than I thought. He pulled out a knife and it all happened so fast. I just remember a sharp pain in my stomach and then I fell. That's the last thing I remember. When I opened my eyes, I saw you. I squeezed Leo's hand as silent tears streamed down my cheeks. My boy had been so brave. He had risked his life to protect the house, to protect the homemade fritter recipe I had promised to pass on to him. I looked at him, my heart in pieces, but at the same time filled with pride. Leo wasn't just my grandson. He was the worthy heir, the one willing to give his life to protect our family's values. Karen, hearing Leo, couldn't take it anymore. She threw herself onto her son, sobbing loudly. "Leo, forgive me, my love. Forgive me." Her voice was breaking, filled with pain and regret. Leo looked at his mother with a mix of exhaustion and confusion, but he didn't answer her. I looked at Karen, remembering her words at Ashley's house. "I hurt my own son." Those words were clearer now, like a confession of guilt. I wanted to ask. I wanted to scream to know the truth, but I held back because I knew Leo needed me to be calm more than ever. Ashley came over and put a hand on Leo's shoulder, but he subtly moved away, avoiding her gaze. The gesture was small, but it was enough for me to realize that Leo also sensed something wasn't right. Ashley pressed her lips together, trying to force a smile. "Rest, Leo, don't talk so much. I just wanted to see if you were okay." But her voice sounded icy, with no warmth at all. I looked at her and the suspicion in my heart grew even stronger. Ashley wasn't like Karen. She didn't show her emotions, but it was precisely that false calm that gave me chills. The atmosphere in the recovery room was heavy. The only sounds were the constant beep of the heart monitor and Karen's choked sobs. A few days later, when Leo was out of danger, I got a call from the police. A deep, serious voice came through the line. "Mrs. Martha, we've detained the suspect who broke into your house that night. Could you come down to the station to help us with the investigation?" I nodded, though the person on the phone couldn't see me. "I'm on my way," I replied, my voice trembling. I knew this was the chance to uncover the truth, to understand why Leo, my dear grandson, had to go through that nightmare. I called Karen and Ashley and told them to come with me to the station. But they both made excuses not to go, saying they were busy taking care of Leo. "Mom, I have to stay at the hospital with the boy," Karen said, her voice weak over the phone. Ashley was colder. "I have work at the office, Mom. Can you go by yourself?" I didn't argue, I just hung up in silence. But inside, I knew very well they were trying to avoid it, and that avoidance only made me more suspicious. I put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and drove to the police station alone, my heart heavy but determined. When I arrived, an officer took me to a small room with a one-way mirror that looked into the interrogation room. I sat down, clenching my hands to control my nerves. Through the glass, I saw a thin, middle-aged man with messy hair and a restless, anxious look in his eyes. He was sitting across from two police officers, his hands cuffed, his shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. The lead officer placed a file on the table and said in a harsh voice, "Who hired you to break into Mrs. Martha's house?" The man shook his head, mumbling, "I don't know anything. I was just passing by." But the cop wasn't easily fooled. He took out a phone, played a recording, and held it up to the man. "We have proof you communicated with two women before you went in. Talk. Who hired you?" The man's face turned pale, his eyes darted around, and sweat beaded on his forehead. He tried to deny it a little longer, but faced with irrefutable evidence, he finally hung his head and said in a shaky voice, It was her daughters-in-law. One's named Ashley, and the other is Karen." Those words were like a hammer blow straight to my heart. I froze, feeling my world crumble. Ashley and Karen, my two daughters-in-law whom I had loved like my own daughters, whom I had trusted. I gripped the edge of the chair, trying to keep from crying right there. But tears were already blurring my vision and rolling down my cheeks. The officer continued questioning, his voice cold. "And what did they ask you to do?" The man swallowed hard, his voice even shakier. "They promised me a ton of money if I stole the notebook where the lady writes down her fritter recipe." I felt my heart stop. The homemade fritter recipe, my mother's legacy, the soul of my business, was that the reason Leo almost died? The man continued, his voice breaking. "That night, they told me to go in through the back door of Mrs. Martha's house. They said she wouldn't be there because they had invited her to dinner to keep her busy. I had a knife, but just for self-defense, I swear. I didn't plan on hurting anyone." He paused, his eyes filled with panic. But then that kid, Leo, he caught me. He started yelling and he jumped on me to stop me. I got really scared, we struggled, and I panicked and stabbed him. It wasn't on purpose. I just wanted to get away. Every word he spoke was like another knife twisting at the wound in my heart. I pictured Leo, my brave grandson, facing the thief alone, risking his life to protect the house, to protect our family's legacy, and all because of Karen and Ashley's greed. I covered my face and the tears flowed uncontrollably. The officer looked at me through the mirror and said in a grave voice, "Mrs. Martha, would you like to confirm this information?" I nodded silently, unable to speak. Tears blurred my vision, but I could still clearly see the image of Leo in the hospital bed, weak but strong. The officer added, "We will be summoning Miss Karen and Miss Ashley to give their statements shortly. This case has sufficient evidence to charge them with masterminding and acting as accomplices. Do you wish to add anything else?" I shook my head, my voice choked. "I just want justice for my grandson." He nodded, wrote something in the file, and told me I could leave. But when I walked out of the police station, my legs were trembling, as if they no longer had the strength to hold me up. I leaned against the cold hallway wall, taking a deep breath, trying to contain the rage and pain that were overwhelming me. My heart was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, because Karen and Ashley had betrayed the family, had put Leo on the verge of death just for their greed. Pain, because the people I had loved, whom I considered my own blood, could be so cruel. I thought about the nights we spent together at the dinner table, the times Karen helped me wrap the fritters, the times Ashley laughed and talked about the future. Now all of that was a lie. I felt my heart breaking in two, but at the same time, a flame of determination ignited within me. I wasn't going to let this go. Leo deserved justice, and my family needed to be cleansed of this betrayal. Almost immediately, I called Karen and Ashley, my voice cold. "Tonight, come to the house. We need to talk." Without giving them a chance to refuse, I hung up, my heart heavy but resolute. When I got home, I prepared a pot of tea and placed it in the center of the living room coffee table. The scent of jasmine filled the air, but it couldn't calm the tension I felt. I sat on the sofa, running the beads of my rosary through my fingers, trying to hold on to what little calm I had left. The house, which was always filled with laughter, was now shrouded in a suffocating silence. I looked around, and my eyes landed on the family photo hanging on the wall. Me, Rob, Jason, Leo, and also Karen and Ashley, all smiling at a birthday party. That photo was now a painful reminder of everything that had been lost. Karen arrived first. She came in with a shattered expression, her eyes swollen from crying. She was wearing an old sweater and her shoulders were slumped, as if she were carrying the full weight of her guilt. She didn't dare look me in the eye, just said quietly, "Mom, I'm here." I nodded and pointed to the armchair opposite me. "Sit down." Ashley arrived right after with a completely different attitude. She was wearing full makeup, her lips painted a deep red, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, as if she were coming to a party and not a serious conversation. But I could see the tension in her eyes, even though she tried to hide it with her usual arrogance. I didn't beat around the bush. I got straight to the point, my voice clear but cold as ice. "I know everything. The police have the thief's statement. He said you hired him to steal the fritter recipe. I want to hear the truth from your own mouths." The air in the living room froze. Karen was trembling, clutching the hem of her blouse, on the verge of speaking, but Ashley beat her to it, her tone defiant. "If you hadn't been so stubborn about that old, outdated recipe, we wouldn't have had to resort to this." I was stunned by her audacity. Ashley stood there with a cold look, without a shred of remorse. Her words were like a knife cutting deep into my heart. I had loved her like a daughter. I had thought she understood the value of family. But now, all I saw was a stranger, a person blinded by greed. "Ashley," I said, trying to stay calm, "you say that a recipe is outdated, but do you know that it's the entire life of your husband's grandmother and mine? That it's the soul of this family?" At that moment, Karen broke down, crying. She took my hand and said through her sobs, "Mom, forgive me. I was wrong. I just wanted things to be better for the family. I never thought things would go this far. Her hot tears fell on my hand, but they couldn't ease the pain in my heart. I looked at her, remembering the image of Leo in the hospital bed, weak and covered in bandages. "Better?" I asked, my voice choked. "Karen, you two nearly killed Leo. Is that what you call better?" Ashley immediately turned to scold Karen, her voice sharp as a knife. "Don't play the innocent, Karen. Weren't you the one who kept pushing me over and over? You were the one who said we'd get rich with the recipe, that we wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore." Karen shook her head, her face bathed in tears. "No, Ashley, you were the one who found that guy. You said that if we just scared my mother-in-law a little, she'd agree to sell the recipe." The two of them started screaming at each other in front of me, blaming one another as if I didn't even exist in the room. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my hand on the table and the sharp sound cut off their argument. "That's enough. You nearly killed Leo and you still dare to blame each other." Karen and Ashley flinched and fell silent. I looked them in the eyes, my voice trembling with rage and pain. "Do you have any idea the price Leo paid? My grandson, the boy I love more than anything in this world, was in a hospital, bleeding out, all because of your greed." Ashley, instead of showing remorse, continued with her excuses. "Think about it, Mom. That recipe is worth a fortune. If you sold it, you'd have a comfortable life, and the family wouldn't have to work so hard. You've been very selfish." Her words were like adding fuel to the fire. I jumped to my feet and pointed at her. "Selfish? Ashley? You call me selfish for wanting to protect my family's legacy? Do you know that every fritter is a memory of my mother, of your grandmother, of the days we spent together overcoming hardships? You don't see the value in it, you only see the money, don't you?" At that moment, Karen knelt on the floor, crying and begging. "Mom, please, I know I was wrong. I really didn't think things would get to the point where Leo would get hurt. I just thought that if we had money, I could give Leo a better life." I looked at her, my heart in pieces. Karen's belated tears couldn't erase the image of Leo in that hospital bed. They couldn't erase the pain I felt. "Karen," I said, my voice cold, "if you had really been thinking about Leo, you wouldn't have put him in danger. You wouldn't have betrayed this family." Ashley stood up, crossing her arms, with the same arrogant look. "Mom, if you want to blame someone, blame us both. But you should do some reflecting too. If you weren't so stubborn, none of this would have happened." I fell silent, not because her words made me doubt myself, but because I realized that greed had taken such a hold of her that there was nothing left to do. My heart grew cold. I had thought I could forgive, that I could find a way to fix things. But now I knew this family was broken, beyond repair. I took a deep breath, gathered all my strength, and called Rob and Jason. "Come to the house right now. It's important." That night my two sons returned, their faces as heavy as lead. Rob came in with red eyes, as if he had been crying the whole way. Jason was clenching his fists, the veins on his hands standing out, as if he were holding back an explosive rage. I asked them to sit, but no one said anything. The living room, with its old wooden coffee table that had witnessed so many family meals, now felt like a silent battlefield. I poured tea, set the pot on the table, but no one touched it. I knew that what I was about to say would change everything, but I couldn't stay silent any longer. I sat down and looked Rob and Jason in the eye, my voice grave but clear. "I just got back from the police station." The thief confessed everything. He said Karen and Ashley hired him to steal the homemade fritter recipe. They invited me to dinner on purpose to keep me busy and give him a chance to act. But Leo discovered him, and that's why he almost lost his life. I paused, taking a breath to hold back my tears. I've already spoken with them. Karen cried and asked for forgiveness, but Ashley, she has no regrets. She said I'm selfish for not selling the recipe. She said it's all my fault. Rob froze, his face pale. He looked at me and then at the floor, as if he couldn't accept the truth. "Karen?" he murmured, his voice breaking. She did that?" I nodded, my heart breaking as I saw the disappointment in my son's eyes. Jason, for his part, couldn't hold back any longer. He slammed his fist on the table, his face red, and pointed into the air as if Ashley was standing in front of him. I can't believe it. Ashley was capable of hurting her own mother-in-law, and Leo, what kind of person is she? I told them the whole conversation, from Ashley's audacity to Karen's belated tears. I told them how they blamed each other, how Ashley called my mother's recipe outdated, how Karen knelt and begged for forgiveness without being able to erase her guilt. Every word I spoke was like a stab, not just to Rob and Jason, but to my own heart. I looked at my 2 sons, whom I had raised with all my love, and I wondered, how did we get to this? They called Karen and Ashley over shortly after. When they walked in, the atmosphere in the room became even more suffocating. Karen kept her head down, her hands trembling, not daring to look at anyone. Ashley maintained her air of arrogance, but I could see the tension in her eyes. Rob stood up and stared at Karen, his voice choked. Tell me, Karen, is it true you did this? You hired someone to hurt my mother, to hurt our son. Karen burst into tears, trying to grab Rob's hand. My love, forgive me this one time. For Leo, I know I was wrong. I just wanted us to have a better life. But Rob snatched his hand away, his eyes red. Better? You nearly killed Leo. How do you expect me to forgive you? He turned to me, his voice trembling. Mom, forgive me. I didn't know things had gotten to this point. I took Rob's hand, trying to comfort him, but my heart was shattered too. Jason couldn't contain himself any longer. He pointed at Ashley, his voice filled with rage. And you, Ashley? You dared to call my mom selfish? You hired someone to break into her house and they hurt Leo. I can't live with someone who only thinks about money and doesn't care about the lives of her family. We're getting a divorce. Ashley let out a mocking laugh, her voice sharp. A divorce? Fine by me, Jason, but you're no saint either. You should have convinced your mom to sell the recipe from the beginning. If she wasn't so stubborn, none of this would have happened. Her words were like adding more fuel to the fire. Jason slammed the table, his voice choked. Don't you blame my mom. She has dedicated her life to building this family, and you've only dedicated yourself to destroying it. He turned to me, his eyes full of pain. Mom, I'm sorry for not realizing this sooner. I stood up silently, opened a drawer in a cabinet, and took out 2 sheets of paper I had already prepared. They were 2 divorce petitions. I had prepared them ever since I left the police station, because I knew that after everything that had happened, this family could not move forward with this betrayal. I placed the 2 papers on the table, my voice clear and firm. Rob, Jason, I'm not forcing you, but I think it's time to cut out what no longer belongs in this family. Karen, Ashley, you went too far. From this day on, I no longer consider you my daughters-in-law. The rest is up to the justice system. Rob, trembling, took the pen and signed the petition. A hot tear fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. He pushed the paper toward Karen without a word, but his look was filled with pain and disappointment. Jason didn't hesitate. He signed with a firm hand and handed the paper directly to Ashley. She threw it on the table and let out a bitter laugh. You'll all regret this. With that, she turned and left, the sound of her heels echoing coldly on the wooden floor. Karen, on the other hand, collapsed to the ground, screaming and crying desperately. Mom, Rob, don't do this. I'm begging you. Forgive me. But no one answered her. Rob turned his back on her and Jason just shook his head, his eyes filled with disgust. The house that was once a haven of peace now echoed with weeping and anger. I stood there, looking at my 2 sons, my heart in pieces. I once dreamed of a happy family, where my children and grandchildren would gather, sharing joys and sorrows. But now that dream was broken. I thought of Leo, of the scar on his abdomen, of his bravery in facing the thief. I knew that as much as it hurt, this family had to remove the tumor of greed and betrayal to have a chance to heal. After that painful confrontation at my house, our family found itself at an unavoidable crossroads. Rob, Jason, and I decided together to press charges against Ashley and Karen. Although my heart twisted at the thought of taking my 2 daughters-in-law, who were once part of my family, before a judge, I knew that justice had to prevail. For Leo, for everything my family had suffered, I couldn't let that betrayal remain in silence. The police quickly completed the case file. Ashley was charged as the mastermind, the brain behind the whole plan. Karen was charged as an accomplice for aiding and abetting the crime. The thin man, the one who stabbed Leo, faced charges of breaking and entering and aggravated assault. In the days before the trial, I lived in a strange state. On one hand, I longed for the truth to come out, but on the other, I was terrified of the curious stares from neighbors and friends. My little shop, which had always been a gathering place to enjoy homemade fritters and friendly conversation, was now the center of gossip. Poor Mrs. Martha, betrayed by her own daughters-in-law, I heard someone whisper at the market. Every word was like a knife that made my heart heavier. But I told myself that I had done nothing wrong. I just wanted to protect my family, protect my mother's legacy, and above all, protect Leo. On the day of the trial, I arrived early and sat in the front row with Rob, Jason, and Leo. Leo was wearing a white shirt. He looked much thinner than before, but his eyes shone with a firmness that filled me with both pride and pain. I knew that under his shirt, the scar on his abdomen was still there, a painful reminder of that terrible night. Rob took my hand trying to comfort me, but I could feel his own hand trembling. Jason sat up straight, his eyes red but full of determination. We didn't talk much, just looked at each other in silence, as if we were preparing for the final battle together. When the judge called for the defendants, the courtroom door opened. Karen entered first, her face haggard and her shoulders shaking from crying. She kept her head down, not daring to look at anyone, as if trying to hide from everyone's gaze. Ashley was the complete opposite. She walked in with an air of arrogance, her lips pressed tightly together, and her cold gaze fixed straight ahead. Despite being accused, she maintained a flawless appearance, with her hair pulled back and an expensive dress, as if she wanted to defy the entire world. I looked at her, and it pained me to think that the daughter-in-law I once loved was now a complete stranger. The prosecutor began to read the case file, his voice clear and emotionless. He described in detail Ashley and Karen's plan, from hiring the man to break into my house to the attempt to keep me busy with dinner to give him the opportunity to act. They played a recording of the man's confession, his trembling voice saying, "They told me to take the notebook with the recipe. They said the lady wouldn't be home, that it would all be easy." A murmur went through the courtroom, and curious gazes fell on my family and me. I lowered my head, trying to contain the shame I felt. I wasn't ashamed of myself, but that my family, that those who were once my blood, could be so cruel. Ashley's lawyer stood up and tried to defend her. In a syrupy voice, he said, "Your Honor, my client acted solely with the intention of improving her family's life. Mrs. Martha has been overly stubborn, rejecting opportunities to collaborate with large corporations, which has put the family in a difficult position. Miss Ashley's action was merely an attempt to change that situation." His words left me cold. Stubborn? I had dedicated my life to preserving my mother's legacy, to protecting the little shop that held so many memories and so much love. But before I could react, the judge banged his gavel and interrupted him firmly. No reason can justify the act of hiring someone to commit theft and endanger a family member's life. Stick to the facts. They called Leo as a witness. He took the stand, looking fragile but with an unbreakable gaze. His voice, though trembling, was firm. That night, I saw a flashlight in my grandmother's house. I called her to confirm, but because I was worried, I yelled and tried to stop the burglar. I just wanted to protect the house and my grandmother's secret. I never imagined that. Or the people behind this would include my own mother. Leo paused, took a deep breath, and his gaze fell on Karen. The courtroom fell silent. Karen burst into loud sobs, repeating, "Leo, forgive me. Forgive me, son." But Leo just lowered his head without responding. Ashley turned away, as if she didn't want to face the damage she had caused. I looked at Leo, my heart filled with a pride mixed with deep pain. My boy had been so brave. He had risked his life to protect the family, to protect the homemade fritter recipe I had promised to pass on to him. But for that very reason, he had had to pay with blood and tears. I clutched the beads of my rosary, trying to keep myself from crying right there in the courtroom. After the arguments, the judge delivered the sentence. Ashley and Karen received a suspended prison sentence with a period of probation. Both were ordered to pay all medical expenses and compensation for emotional damages to Leo. The man who broke into the house received several years in prison. Due to the severity of his crime and his criminal record, when the sentence was read, Karen buried her head in her hands, crying inconsolably, while Ashley just pressed her lips together with the same cold look. I don't know if she truly felt remorse, but for me, it no longer mattered. Justice had been served, even if it couldn't erase the scars on my family's heart. When we left the courthouse, the bright sun was shining on the courtyard, where neighbors and friends were gathered. The curious stares and whispers surrounded us. Poor Mrs. Martha, her family torn apart by greed, I heard someone say. I lowered my head, feeling a wave of humiliation, not for myself, but because my family had become the town gossip. But then Leo took my hand, his voice low but steady. Grandma, thanks to you, the truth came out. I'm proud of you. His words were like a cool breeze that soothed my bleeding heart. I smiled at Leo and squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you too, son. The trial was over, leaving scars that would be hard to heal in my family's heart. But amidst the pain and loss, I realized that life had to go on. The little shop, which held so many memories of my mother, of those difficult but love-filled days, was still there, as strong as I was. I knew it was time to pass on the legacy of the homemade fritters to the person who deserved it most, Leo. He wasn't just my grandson. He was the one who had risked his life to protect the family's secret. In his bright eyes, I saw passion and loyalty, the same things I had seen in myself when I was young. One cool morning, as the first rays of sun streamed through the window, painting the small kitchen golden, I called Leo over. I took the recipe book from the old drawer with its worn leather cover and yellowed pages filled with careful notes on how to make the homemade fritters. I placed the book on the table and looked Leo in the eye, my voice warm and serious. Leo, I've guarded this secret my whole life. It's not just a recipe, it's the heart of our family. Now it's time for me to give it to you. Leo took the book with trembling hands, clutching it as if he feared it would disappear. His eyes shone, filled with tears, and his voice was hoarse. You really trust me, Grandma? I smiled tenderly and placed a hand on his shoulder. You risked your life to protect it. No one deserves it more than you, Leo. He lowered his head, and a silent tear fell onto the book, but the smile on his lips was as bright as the sun outside. I knew my decision was the right one. In the following days, the small kitchen became our classroom. I taught Leo how to choose the perfect potatoes to make them soft, what kind of breadcrumbs created the crunchiest coating, and even how to feel the temperature of the oil just by experience. I stood by his side, patiently guiding him through each step, just as my mother had done with me. Leo listened attentively, his hands clumsy at first, but his gaze full of determination. His first fritters weren't perfect. Some of them broke apart. Others had the filling ooze out, but I would just laugh and pat him on the shoulder. One step at a time, Leo. I ruined dozens of batches before I got one right. Leo practiced relentlessly, sweat running down his forehead, but he never complained. There were afternoons he would spend hours by the hot skillet, adjusting every little detail just to achieve a perfect fritter. I would watch him, filled with pride. Leo wasn't just learning to cook. He was learning to value his family, to value the simple but sacred things. Once, when he burned a batch, he sighed and mumbled, I don't want to disappoint you. Grandma. I stroked his head and told him, you never disappoint me. Leo, you make me so proud. Rob and Jason didn't stay on the sidelines either. After everything that had happened, my two sons seemed to have matured, realizing that this family needed to be rebuilt from the rubble. Rob, though still hurt by Karen's betrayal, started spending time at the shop. He helped Leo experiment with new flavors, carefully noting down each improved recipe. Once he suggested adding a bit of cheese to the filling, and when Leo tried it, the delicious aroma filled the kitchen with laughter. Saint, "Mom, I think this could be our new star dish," Rob said, his eyes lighting up as if he had rediscovered his joy. Jason, for his part, brought a fresh perspective. He created a social media channel for the shop, filming authentic videos of Leo learning to cook under my supervision. In those videos, I saw myself years ago in the kitchen with my mother, and now it was me with Leo. Jason shared our story, without hiding the pain we had been through, but highlighting our family's strength and love. "Grandma Martha's shop doesn't just sell fritters. It sells memories and loyalty," he wrote in one post. The first video got hundreds of views, then thousands. Customers started coming back more than ever. They were curious to try the fritters made by the true heir, as Jason called Leo. One afternoon, as the sunset painted the neighborhood gold, the shop was more lively than ever. Customers formed a long line, and the laughter and conversation never stopped. Leo, in his flour-dusted apron, was personally frying a batch of golden, fragrant fritters. The smell of butter and potatoes spread throughout the place, like a warm invitation. He carefully placed a fritter on a plate and brought it to me, his eyes nervous. "Grandma, try it. I made it exactly like you taught me." I took a bite. The crispy coating broke, and the soft filling melted in my mouth, bringing with it the taste of memories, of love. I smiled with satisfaction and looked at Leo. "You did it? Leo, your great-grandmother would be proud of you too." Leo's happy laugh echoed, mixing with Rob's and Jason's. The whole family was gathered in the small kitchen, just like we used to be before everything fell apart. I looked around, saw the faces of my loved ones, and felt an immense peace. The wounds in my heart hadn't fully healed. Everything was still there. But seeing Leo by the skillet, carefully frying each fritter, I knew this family had regained its faith and hope. I stepped out to the shop's doorway, watching the soft sunset filter through the window, illuminating Leo's radiant face. He turned to look at me and gave me a brilliant smile. "Grandma, I want to make another batch for Mrs. Davis and the neighbors. They helped me that night. I want to thank them." I nodded as a silent tear rolled down my cheek. Leo wasn't just the heir to the homemade fritter recipe. He was the heir to the family's heart, to its kindness and loyalty. He was the greatest pride of my life. I stood there watching the little shop get back its rhythm, my heart full of hope. Although we had lost so much, we still had each other. We still had our delicious fritters. And above all, we still had love. I ran the beads of my rosary through my fingers and whispered to my mother in my heart, "Mom, I did the right thing, didn't I? And I'm sure that somewhere she is smiling, satisfied that her legacy has been passed into the right hands." Our story closed with the sunset, but I knew that for Leo, for the shop, and for this family, a new chapter had just begun. After everything that happened, I realized that in a family, the most valuable thing isn't money or fame, but love, honesty, and loyalty. Greed can blind people, leading them to betrayal and pain. But sincere affection always shines a light, rescuing us from the darkness. I want to say to you, who have followed my story to this point, cherish the spiritual legacy your grandparents and parents left you, because it is the thread that connects the generations, the sanctuary for our hearts. When we learn to care for and protect those values, we not only preserve the memory of those who came before us, but we also plant the seeds of faith, courage, and true love in future generations. The story you have just heard has had its names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my situation, what would you do? Would you choose silence to keep the peace? Or would you dare to confront everything to reclaim your own voice? I would like to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I'm sure that courage will lead us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'll leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.